courtroom, and it's approximately 7:40 p.m. right now. Joel?
Thanks, Rich. In accordance with the provisions of Section 10:4-8D of the Open Public Meetings Act, the date, location, and time of the commencement of this meeting is reflected in a meeting notice, a copy of which schedule has been filed with the village manager and with the village clerk, the Ridgewood News, the Record newspaper, and posted on the bulletin board in the entry lobby of the village municipal offices at 131 North Maple Avenue, and on the village website, all in accordance with the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act.
Thanks, Joel. Please stand for the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Michael, roll call.
Mayor Knudsen? Here. Councilman Voigt?
Here.
Ms. Altano? Mr. Joel?
Here.
Ms. Patiri? Mr. Scheibner?
Here.
Mr. Torrielli?
Here.
Ms. McWilliams?
Here.
Ms. Porto?
Here.
Chief Van Gore?
Here. Okay, thanks, Michael. All right, our first agenda item will be public comments on topics not pending before the board. Does anyone from the public want to come forth?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Jason Tuvell, attorney for KS Broad LLC. I'm here this evening. I know our application is obviously not on the agenda. Just for the board's edification, we filed a new site plan application for the KS Broad property. Not to get into any detail on the substance, but it reduces the density, and I think in addition addresses a lot of the architectural comments raised by the board as part of the discussion on the prior application. We've met with your professionals to discuss it. We are getting a completeness letter hopefully this week from your planner, and the purpose of me attending this meeting is to request possibly a special meeting from the board to get this matter on the agenda for October. We had briefly discussed with your attorney and your planner and your engineer at this meeting possibly doing the third week of October. That was the week of October, I believe, 16th, 17th, 18th. And we just wanted to come here this evening and see if the board was available, the room was available, and if we can get a quorum for that date.
Let's see, you said 16, 17, 18th?
Right, that week, I think.
17th is our regular meeting, which is already booked. So you're saying 16th and 18th then? You can't do? All right, well, I mean, the first question will be, how do you feel about it? I mean, special session isn't the normal course that we usually have. We've had them in the past in certain situations where, you know, maybe court ordered to expedite things, but, you know, our usual meeting schedule is twice a month, but, you know, I'm game for whatever the board wants to do in a sense. If people feel that they have the time and want to schedule something and it's a benefit to the village, that's one thing. Or on the other hand, if you're booked up and you figure that the meeting schedule is heavy enough, then, you know, anyone have any input?
I'm fine with it.
You're fine with what?
I'm fine with either of those dates.
Okay.
I mean, it would help to know if we didn't give a special meeting, do we, in our crystal ball, do we know about when he'd be heard? Like knowing how full we are coming up?
I guess it would be November 21st would be the first date. Yeah.
Right.
And the reason I thought October would be a good date or mid-October was because I know with November we have the League of Municipalities that a lot of people attend, as well as Thanksgiving. So that's why I thought getting it done in October would be helpful.
Dave, you have any feelings one way or the other?
I don't have any scheduled conflicts, but I anticipate that there might be one coming up, and I just don't have a firm date on it yet. So I'm sort of on the fence about it.
Okay. Chief?
Yeah, I'll be around that week.
Okay. Susan?
We have a scholarship program we do every year. I'm committed on those 2 dates.
Francis, do you
I'd only be available on the 18th. So.
have a feeling?
I don't think I have any particular conflict in October. Is the 18th a council meeting?
No, it's, no, that's typically not, but like I said, for me, it doesn't work anyway.
Joel?
Right now, I think I can make it on the 18th, but
Okay.
I'm available both nights, 16th
Okay.
and 18th.
Okay. I mean, I can. That would be 5. I think that you're just squeaking out, so if someone drops, you may fall short.
Right, I mean, those were dates, and that was a week that we discussed when we met with your professionals. I mean,
Yeah.
we're not, if the next week in October is more, acceptable for people based on dates or availability, I mean, we can make it work. I just want, your professionals were available at that time, which is why I suggested it.
If, depending on what time it started on the 16th, I could probably, I mean, are we committed to starting at 7:30? Do we want to start a little later?
the 18th or the 16th, Maryland, are close, I think.
Oh, who had the, so which turned out to be the better date?
Yeah, the 18th.
The 18th, then.
Okay, same thing. If it's the 18th, I can attend that program, and then I could be here by, if we could start at 8 o'clock, I could probably get here by then.
Yeah, and I mean, I suspect, obviously, there's always questions, and we have multiple witnesses. We may not finish in one night, but just to get the process started. So if there are members of the board that can't attend, or, for example, if the mayor comes a little bit late or whatever, because of prior applications, we can have the transcript available to you. So if you miss a portion of the meeting, we could obviously provide that to you, and everybody can be eligible at a following meeting to vote if that's the case.
Okay. All right. Should we take a vote? October 18th. Who's in favor of the 18th? Let's see, 1. Dave, you're all right with the 18th?
No,
You were a maybe, but
I can't commit to it,
2,
I'll put
3,
it that way.
4.
Um,
6.
I may
so
be
it's
able to,
6
but
in
I
favor.
can't
So
commit
we'll
at this
schedule it
point.
for the 18th.
Great, okay, and I'll speak with Chris and Michael about getting the appropriate notices out and things of that nature.
Okay.
I'm
And-
going to need to check on the availability of the conference room,
Yeah,
the
that's
courtroom.
Okay, all right, so I mean, it's sort of scheduled for the 18th, so if everything falls in, or someone has conflicts or thing, we'll let you know, but we'll work with you, but it looks like it's scheduled for the 18th.
Okay, that's great.
Okay?
Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's time. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Okay.
Can we start it a little, can we start at 8? Is that
Yeah.
okay? Ask Jason, though.
Jason, can we start at 8? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, if we're gonna have multiple meetings, so just to get it started, I'd be fine with that.
Okay, good,
Okay.
thanks.
Yeah, I'll confirm with Michael just so we can get the appropriate time and the notice so the public is aware. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay. Anyone else have any public comment? All right, our next item will be committee, commission, and professional update for non-agenda topics. To my right, any reports?
Historic preservation was canceled last week due to lack of applications pending.
Okay. To my left? Okay. I'll report for the master plan subcommittee. We met prior to this meeting, and we went through certain processes that we're going to do. We're going to do an RFP for the visioning component for the master plan. So we're going to post that, get applications in, and interview certain planners that do visioning. And so I'll get an RFP from Chris, and then we're going to work it up through the committee and approve it, and then post it, and see what kind of responses we get. You know, we want to do a due diligence on this to get several responses so that we can assess it from qualification point of view and cost point of view. And also idea point of view, just to see how other people view it on that. And once we get that locked in, who we're going to hire for it, and I guess we're looking to hire by November maybe, then we'll kind of get an indication of what our timeline will be from there doing the visioning. So we don't know if it's going to take 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, or longer for it, but we'll work with that planner doing the visioning component for that. So it'll be posted, and it'll be open to any planners doing visioning components. We'll also contact the Board of Adjustment to get a report from them on certain burning issues that they have, just to get a flavor of information from them to know. Usually you're supposed to do that yearly, and we'll see what kind of applications they're getting and see what issues that they have so that we can take that into account when we're reviewing things. Anything else, subcommittee, or?
No, I just think the importance of that, we're really looking for a process that absolutely engages the public to the fullest extent possible, and to get a flavor from stakeholders as to what their interests are.
Okay, yeah, a very open process, so we're going to be taking a lot of information in.
Yep.
Okay, Michael, is there any correspondence received?
Yes. We received a traffic report from Petrie Traffic, a memo from the village manager, and an email from the planning board attorney.
Okay. All right, thanks. All right, our next item will be 257 Ridgewood Avenue, LLC, Block 3703, Lot 46 and 8.01, preliminary and final major site plan. Public hearing continued from August 15, 2017. The attorney on this is Tom Brunage, and we've heard from the engineer, Mike Dipple, on July 18th, and then on August 15th, and we also heard from Tom Toronto from United Way. So I guess next up, you'll probably have architect and traffic and other things, but you have the floor, Tom.
Thank you. You're correct in that we did have those witnesses, and Bruce Engelbaugh, one of the principals at Minnewaska, the architects for the project, did testify, and I believe concluded what I would consider be the direct questioning, at least from me. And so what I anticipate doing, with your indulgence, is to put Mr. Engelbaugh up and available for answering whatever questions that the board may have at this point, to be followed by Eric Keller, a traffic engineer, who did a traffic report, which was submitted to the village and submitted to John Jarr along the way. And then finally, John Zabo, one of the principals of Burgess and Associates, on the planning issues. At the suggestion of Mr. Martin, and I believe perhaps somebody else on the board, we have filed with the village a major soil movement permit application, which we have noticed pursuant to your ordinance. And to that end, I have a proof of publication and an affidavit of service that the appropriate notice as required by the ordinance has been completed, and I'd like to have it marked and hand it to Mr. Caffarelli for record purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Brunage.
Believe it or not, I'm on AR10-L.
Yep, that's right.
You want to make it AR11?
AR11 makes sense. Can I just... Oh, yeah. She can walk in, I'm sorry.
This is notice of everything, including the major soil permit, or just the major soil permit?
The notice for the hearing was done months ago.
Understood, and properly carried.
Yeah, these particular notices are focused on the question of the major soil movement permit.
Perfect. Either way is fine, as long as the major soil permit is addressed. Yeah, this is AR11. notice is satisfactory. Thank you, Mr. Burdich.
You're welcome.
I'll hand this down to the secretary.
Okay.
Having established notice, then, the order would be at the conclusion of the witnesses for the application in the main, for want of describing it a little differently. We'll finish up with Mike Dipple on the question of the major soil movement permit. And we thank the village for bringing along an engineer. Johan has been in touch with Mike Dipple, I know, and can address whatever questions we have to at that point. So our hope is that we can conclude tonight, and with that, Mr. Engelbaugh is here. I'd remind him that he continues to be under oath, and he's available to answer whatever questions the board might have with respect to the architectural issues that were presented at last meeting.
Very good.
Okay. All right. Did he have any other direct testimony to present? He was done?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Would it help if he simply referenced the last exhibit or the exhibit that's
Yeah,
up
I think
on
he
the
can
board,
just-
and just to get us thinking about what the
I think that would
application is all
tune it
about?
in. Yeah.
If you don't mind, Bruce, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, the drawing we're looking at right now is labeled site plan, and it is exhibit AR7. Just to get you familiarized again, North Maple is going horizontally along the bottom. Franklin Avenue is off to the right, and Ridgewood is off to the left-hand side going vertically. The building shown in green here is the Silfons building that's existing, and the only thing we're doing in the Silfons building is adding special needs housing on the top floor. In order to accommodate that, we're going to make the elevator larger in the Silfons building to accommodate a gurney and wheelchairs. Over on the right-hand side, shown in tan, that is the new building that we're doing, the Enclave. You can see it's 39 dwelling units, and it is basically 4 stories over top of a parking deck. But it gets a little bit more complicated than that because there's actually a 2-level deck. There's residential units in the front, and then there's a second-story parking deck in the back, so they interlock, so to speak. The access to the lower-level parking deck would be right here, off of North Maple Avenue, and the access to the upper-level parking deck would be here, off of Franklin Avenue. The front of the building, whether you can see here it says roof terrace, we've taken the top level off that faces onto North Maple Avenue. And then in the back, right here, this would step up to 4 stories. So it has a nicer scale, so to speak, when you're on North Maple Avenue because the building's going to appear much lower. So I don't know if you want me to go into a little bit more, like walking through the floor plans, things like that.
That might help, because I think it's important that the board recall that...
Okay, I'll just try to do a recap of where I was.
And I'd like you to touch specifically on the elimination of certain space in the Silfons building and replacing it with the special needs housing.
Okay. Last time we were up, I'll just go through these very quickly. If anybody has a question, just stop me. We started out with this. This is an exhibit AR6. And it just shows some of the buildings in downtown Ridgewood. What we were trying to do, if you look in the lower right, you'll see that the buildings are broken up vertically. And that happened back in the day because that's where the property lines were. People built their buildings with their own identity and individual character. And that's what we tried to capture in the facade on North Maple Avenue. You also see on the lower level there's a horizontal line, and below that they were usually retail shops, so we tried to capture that vocabulary as well, and you'll see that when we get on the front elevation. The next exhibit is labeled AR-8, and it is the east elevation, or the North Maple Avenue elevation. And this shows the existing Seal Farms building over on the left side and the new Enclave building on the right. Here you can, actually I'm not going to spend too much time on this because we have an enlargement and I can go into more detail on that. For this, just remember we've got the Seal Farms building over here, the new Enclave building over here. If you have any questions, we can refer to that. This is an enlargement of what we're calling the Enclave. It's same elevation that we just looked at, just an enlargement of the newer construction that is going to take place. North Maple Avenue obviously is in the front here. This area over here is the ingress into the parking deck, and then this is the front door or the address of the building. Kind of thinking back to those images of downtown Ridgewood, you can see how we tried to break this up vertically so that each one of those portions has somewhat an identity, so to speak, that's similar to the buildings in downtown Ridgewood. You also see this horizontal line that comes across here. They were retail shops on Ridgewood Avenue. We've kind of kept that same vocabulary on this design. Up above are the residential units. Here you can see 1, 2, 3 stories of residential. We also have a 4th floor, but again, this top level steps way back. And when we get to a building section, you'll see that this portion of the building is set back about 32 feet from the face of this building, face of this facade, rather.
Bruce, can you just mention the exhibit you're referring to?
This is exhibit AR-9. Okay, the next thing we looked at was a flip chart of the floor plans. What we're looking at now is the ground floor plan. It's labeled Exhibit AR-10A. Yeah, AR-10A. In the gray color here is the parking deck, the lower level parking deck. There are 46 public spaces. We were just looking at the elevation. This is the ingress into the garage at this point. This is the main front entrance at this point right here. We also talked a little bit about some of the red clouds that you see on these drawings. Those refer to responses to Beth McManus's memo. On this one, you'll see a couple red clouds. What we did is we added a turnaround space in the parking deck here so that if somebody came in, they could turn around and get back out. And we moved that space over to this area so we didn't lose any spaces when we made that revision. Up in the back here, we put in double doors. This is kind of a service area, and we wanted it a little bit wider. There's a ramp here so that a hand truck could get down here if they needed it. We just wanted some wider doors there. That was that red cloud. As we go up through the building, I'll explain how the trash works, but right over here is what I'll call the lowest level, or the last place the trash gets collected. A truck would come in here. These dumpsters would wheel out. It would pull in and dump it into the truck, back in here, turn around and go out. The trash, we'll see it on the upper level, but the trash would come down a chute, and then a porter would take it over to this area. But again, that's on the area up above. Next exhibit is, I got to take a break here and lift this up, hold on. Okay, this next exhibit is AR-10B. It is the first floor plan. Now we're one level up, so to speak, from North Maple Avenue. This level, you can see we have parking in the back, and this is the second level parking deck, and then we have residential units up in the front. We have two elevators right here. The larger one is a service elevator. This other one would be the nicer elevator for the residents. We have two stair towers, one over here on the left, and one over here on the kind of the right side towards the top of the sheet. But you can see as you come in off of Franklin Avenue via car, you would drive underneath this portion of the building. What you see with the red diagonal stripes, that's the building up above. So you would drive underneath that, find your parking place, and then this is what would, for all intents and purposes, be the front door for the residents. We have a double-loaded corridor, and you can see we have residential units on both sides of that corridor. Over here is the trash. We were talking about the level below. The way the trash would be handled, it would come down this service elevator. It would, I'm sorry, it wouldn't go down the service elevator. It would go down a trash chute. There would be a compactor in here. A porter would take it out of the trash room over to this holding area. And there's a chute here where it would drop down to the area below, and that's where the truck would pick it up and take it out. Next exhibit is AR-10C. It's the second floor. And on the Seal Farms building, in kind of the bluish color over here, this is the special needs housing. You can see we have a one-bedroom, and the rest are two bedrooms over here. And then we have a community room shown in this greenish color. Here's the elevator with the vertical transportation. Over on the right-hand side in the tan color is the enclave. You can see it's a double-loaded corridor. We have the elevators in the center here and the trash room shown in gray, and then a stair tower at each end. Third floor, we're now up above the Seal Farms building. So all we're seeing is the new enclave, this L-shaped building in the tan color. Very similar to the floor below. Next exhibit is the fourth floor. This is AR-10E. Again, you see that L shape, but the difference on this level is, and it's hard to see because it's all the same color of tan here, but this is that roof terrace in the front here. So the only residential units are above my hand to the back. So this is a single loaded corridor here, and then it turns to a double loaded corridor. Again, the stair towers at each end, and the elevators in the center with the trash room. This room up in the upper left is an amenity space. Again, that was added to Beth's memo about we needed more common space for the building. So this is a space that's accessible to all the residents. Next exhibit is sheet A6, the roof plan. And this is exhibit number AR-10, I think it's F. Yeah, it's F. So you see where the terrace is down below in this lighter tone of tan. Up above in this darker brown color is the roof. You can see we have the condensing units, and there's a red cloud on here. What we did is we added a louvered screen so that you don't see the condensing units. It's just a series of louvers, so that if you're standing, you actually wouldn't even see them from the ground, but if you were up in the air in any of the surrounding buildings, you would see decorative louvers rather than the mechanical equipment. Won't spend too much time on this. This is sheet A7. This is elevations. It's exhibit AR-10G. These are basically the black and white versions of the color ones that we looked at earlier. Down here on the bottom of the sheet, it says south elevation. We didn't really look at that. This would be Ridgewood Avenue in the foreground. This would be Seal Fawns in the foreground as well. And then the new Enclave building would sit far back in the distance. So if you can see this from the ground here. This is Ridgewood. We're looking this way. Next sheet is sheet number A8. It's more building elevations and is labeled Exhibit AR10H. On the top, we have the west elevation. This would be the Seal Fawns building on the right-hand side, and then this would be the Enclave on your left side. So to get you oriented on the site plan, you'd be looking at it like this. Seal Fawns building on your left, the Enclave on your right. This portion, all in brick, would be this wing right here that comes toward you. The north elevation down below, this is what faces Franklin Avenue. This area here would be the ramp that you drive up, and then you would park underneath the building, and then this is the 3 residential floors that are up above the parking, and then this is North Maple Avenue out here to the far left. One thing I did want to talk about that I didn't talk about last time was in Beth's memo. It's concealing the parking. We don't show the Breakorama building up here, but the Breakorama building is going to hide any of the parking. I think the Breakorama building is probably 10 feet higher. So any cars that are parked behind that building, you're not going to see them. You will see them parked here, though. Next drawing is sheet A9. It's a building section. The exhibit is labeled AR10I. This would be North Maple Avenue on the right-hand side. You'll see here the 3 dwelling units, the 3 stories, with the terrace up above that face out onto North Maple Avenue. The garage down below, and you can see that it's partially buried. You actually slope down a little bit to get into that garage. And then by the time you get to the back, it's pretty much fully buried. There is an existing utility room that's there now. That's where all the utilities come in, actually for the Seal Fawns building, and we're going to keep that room, and it's going to be a service and utility room for this project as well. This wing in the back up towards the upper left, let me just get this site plan oriented right for you. So this building section that we're looking at now would be a line cut through here. I know it's hard to see down here. I don't know if everybody can see it. Right through here. So you're seeing North Maple to the right, the roof terrace right here, parking in the back, and then you'll see this wing, which is this right here. That's this wing right here. This is good because it shows if there's someone on the sidewalk, even the opposite side of the sidewalk on North Maple Avenue, when they look up, this is the sight line, so you can see that wall. This is the wall that we were talking about that was set 32 feet back. It's right here. So if you're on the sidewalk, you won't even see that wall. You'll see this height here. Next exhibit is labeled AR10J. It's sheet number 810, and it's typical unit floor plans. On the left, we show a typical one-bedroom at 865 square feet. On the right is a typical two-bedroom at 1,250 square feet. Just in general, we try to keep the kitchens and the baths in the back where we don't need the windows, and we have the living and the bedroom spaces out here on the window wall. Next exhibit was sheet number A11. It's labeled AR10K. And it just shows a breakdown of the various square footages. There's a chart down in the lower left-hand corner, and it just shows the retail, office, residential, and how they all total up. Last exhibit was a building height diagram. It's exhibit number AR10L. And what we did is we took several of the buildings that are nearby, such as Franklin Avenue. You can recognize it more with the images that are down on the bottom. But we had Franklin Avenue, Cottage Place, and then we put the Enclave project in the center, and we compared the heights of the surrounding buildings. Just looking at the Enclave, the height per code is 54 feet 11 inches, or 54.92 feet. The thing to remember about this is it's measured from an imaginary plane that's established by setting points around the perimeter of the building. We take an average of those points. That sets this imaginary grade plane line, and then we measure from there to the top. So that's how it's measured per code. Some of the earlier hearings that we had back, dating back to 2014, even 2012, there was a concern about how high is the building from the sidewalk. So we took all the heights, measured again. The terrace is taking a floor off of the building in the front. So we took all those various heights, because you can see the parapet steps up and down. We averaged them together, and from the sidewalk it averaged 46 feet 4.5 inches. So that's basically a quick recap of what we talked about last time, with a couple additional pieces in there.
And so, any questions of this particular witness on the architectural exhibits?
All right, Jeff?
The condensing units that are going to be on the top of the building, how big are they? How much do they weigh?
How much they weigh, I don't know. They're probably about 2.5 feet to maybe 3 feet would be tall.
So if you wanted to get them down, in other words, if they need repair, another one, how would they go through the elevator to get out?
No, they'd have to take it to the stairs.
Okay, so they're portable. They're portable by human beings as opposed to like a crane or.
Like that. Most times, if they're doing a lot of them, they probably have a crane to pick them up.
Okay, so if they need to be removed, then a crane would come to remove them. Is that right?
I can't answer that accurately. If they had to come down the stairs, they could.
Okay.
I would say if a contractor has a crane, he'd probably use a crane to get them out of there.
All right. Just wondering how big they are. Okay. Behind the building, that's on the Cottage Place side, can a vehicle go from one side to the other? Can I go south to north behind the building if they wanted to?
You're saying back through here?
Yeah.
Not on the property, no.
Okay, so there's spaces where they'd be cut off. They just can't go straight through.
That's correct.
Okay.
This goes up a ramp, and here you can see there's some stairs.
Got it.
There's probably about an 8-foot drop.
Okay. The property that's next to the building, the Breakorama, do you guys think there's going to be any issues with I would imagine that a new tenant will probably. Thanks. Thank you. Is that better? Sorry. I didn't realize I could be so grating. The property that's next to it, the Breakorama, do you perceive any issues with the tenants if that becomes something else? In other words, if it becomes a high utility or a high utilization type of facility, like a restaurant, is that going to be an issue for the people who are living in that building? Will it affect their quality of life?
Mr. Boyd, would be pure speculation to attempt to answer that question. You know, people will come in and be tenants in the building based on the amenities in the building, the unit that they're going to occupy, et cetera, and they'll take a look at the neighborhood. There's no guarantee the neighborhood isn't going to change, and that's just the way it is. Couldn't speculate as to what someone 2, 5, 10 years from now would feel with respect to changes in Ridgewood or changes in the immediate neighborhood.
Now, I'm just concerned you might have people living in that building who are going to be bitching about what the new facility is next to it. So,
Well, if they're tenants, they can not pay their rent, I suppose, and move. Is the simple answer.
okay.
But obviously, Mr. Brunage is not testifying, so if you know the answer, don't know the answer, want to say what Mr. Brunage said concisely, you can...
I would concur with those thoughts. I mean, it's designed to comply with the building code, so that if anybody wanted to come in there and put a higher building, it complies with all the building codes.
I mean, we had
Mr.
a...
Boyd, the witness is yours.
Thank you. We did have someone come before us a few months ago to propose a restaurant there. And I don't know if that'll come to fruition or not, but it may be a concern. The size of the trucks that can get in and out of there, is that a traffic issue?
That would be a traffic issue.
Okay.
I think it would be best directed to the next witness.
Yeah. The easement between that facility and the Breakorama, is there a space there? Will there be a space, easement space?
Between the two buildings,
Yeah, well, actually between no, there won't be, between so it'll be...
they'll be tied up against
Right,
each other.
okay.
And just so the record is clear, that's per code.
Got it, all right. That's it, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Dave?
You mentioned that the existing utility room that's subterranean is going to stay. I noticed on the plans that there's an indication that there's meters on the west side of the lower level.
Correct.
So are those electric meters?
There are gas meters there.
Gas meters. But the gas actually comes in through the utility room?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, the way we're going to handle that is it's hard to see it, but we're looking at Exhibit AR10I. This is the building section. Down in the lower left-hand corner, there's a plan of that utility room. The meters that you're referring to are over here on the left-hand side. We're not going to disturb that wall. What we're going to do is come off of that existing wall and probably put 1 to 2 columns. And those columns will be about 2.5 feet, roughly, away from that wall. And then there'll be about a 10-inch reinforced concrete slab that's going to cantilever off of those. So we're not going to disturb that wall at all. And then that floor will hold up the rest of the building up above. Does that answer the question?
Not exactly. Have you run this plan by the gas utility, as far as locating the meters that far away from where the gas comes onto the property?
To answer your question, we haven't talked to the gas company yet. The second part of your question about how far they are, they're actually under the new building.
Yeah. My experience with utilities is they like the meters to be as close to where the supply comes into the property, to minimize the possibility of lines being tapped before they hit a meter.
There are 2 places for utility rooms. We have some located here on the right-hand side of the building. If we haven't finalized it, my opinion, I think they're best served coming into that utility room. It's right here in the corner of the building. It's a perfect place to bring a chase up through there. So I think that's a good place to have it, actually.
So you haven't presented this plan to the utilities?
I have not. I don't know if the...
And you're planning to meter all the utilities separately for the different units?
Usually that's how it's done. Again, you're asking some questions. Right now, we're trying to get everybody to look at the big picture. Is this an approvable project? And then we can kind of dig into that level of detail. We don't necessarily have to put all of those meters down here. They can go in the garage. Typically, when we do these residential projects, that's where the meters go. All I'm saying is there's an existing basement down here now. The meters for this building, the Seal Farms building, are in that basement. We can build this without disturbing any of those. But sometimes when you actually get into the nuts and bolts of this, and this is where we have to talk to the gas company, they may say that's high pressure service, you need all new meters, these are old meters. I don't know the answer to that. It's not unusual to come across that type of complexity once you start to dig into the details.
Okay, no further questions.
I think, Mr. Brunage, you'd agree that any utility requirements would be followed by the applicant? Reasonable.
We always hope that public service, electric and gas is reasonable in their demands and requests, but certainly the intention is to provide that particular service, both electric and gas, from the current utility companies.
Right, in a safe manner. You were being interrogated by a professional utility man, so I just hope you know that. I was just going to try to focus one other thing on utilities for a second.
PSEG's recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Chief?
Yeah, I have no questions.
Okay. Susan?
I'm going to take all the chief's time. Bruce, thank you. Bruce, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Bruce, I have a couple of questions. The first, you're using the, I'm just going to go to the first page of the site plan, where, actually on every page of the site plan, on the front entranceway where the staircase is located, and you can see it actually on the ground floor plan A1. Okay, great.
The main entrance?
That staircase there. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm reading that that's the road widening easement. It's in the easement. Is that accurate?
I might have to defer to the civil engineer on that question.
Well, it says it. I guess let me rephrase the question then. Mm-hmm. Because it's in the road widening easement, how would you redesign that as the architect to remove it and place it back behind the road widening easement? How would you handle that?
Look like the road widening easement runs right through what I'll call the bottom riser. And we're actually showing a stairway going up to the left there. So if that front stair, which is, it's nicely designed, it's designed to be attractive, with like maybe some planters on each side. If that were taken away, the ramp still works, and then the stair over to the left would service it as well.
Yeah, so I think that would have to be corrected, because I wouldn't want to compromise our ability to look down the road to other issues that might arise. If I go to, so I think that needs to be addressed actually. If I go to page, also same page, this plan shows the access through that 19-foot. If you look at the upper left corner, actually it would be the that western side, right, a little over to your right. So you see that roadway, that 19-foot wide drive, is going through the village-owned Cottage Place lot. Is that accurate?
Yes.
So my question is, a dump truck or a garbage truck could actually come into the property and then exit through that because there's nothing blocking a vehicle from taking that route. Would that be accurate?
I would say yes, but I would say vehicular and parking and circulation is probably best answered by the traffic engineer.
Actually, I'm going to address it with him, but I just wanted to ask because you did testify about that other driveway running along the western side, right? Exactly. Okay. I wanted to go to the elevations. Admittedly, the front of this building is absolutely beautiful. The Maple Avenue side is beautiful. You did a magnificent job breaking it up. And I think that you took the design elements and applied them appropriately because I think you really got it. This design really gets it. However, that was coming.
It's always a caveat.
So, however, I'm a little concerned, and when I love these little packets as opposed to the big plans, but the problem is I can't see the length of the building. It's hard to read, and I think it says 104. But when I'm looking, if I'm looking at great. So I'm standing on Ridgewood Avenue, and I see the Seal Funds building exactly in the front, and I see the new enclave in the back, right? And I see that you've appointed each of those units or structures, if you will, that breakup point with the same finishes as the front of the building. Is that accurate? So I'm seeing that if it's a brick face or brick veneer, they're all broken up as well with different finishes?
They're not broken up to the same degree, but it is the same materials, which would be brick and stucco.
Yeah, so I think what would be really important for me, because as I turn also now to the Franklin Ave side, there's been so much attention, magnificent attention to the front of the building along Maple, and it occurs to me that from the other three vantage points, whether we're standing from the north looking south, from the west looking east, from the south looking north, we're seeing very significant structure. And part of the design element, I think only ever anticipated what was on the road front. And in this instance, because the way it's kind of seen from 4 different locations, I'm interested in knowing how you could break those massive structures up maybe a little bit more creatively, because it just looks like a wall of building, and I'm not quite understanding how it's going to visualize from different perspectives.
Well, I think one of the things that would have helped is maybe if we saw these in color, because we're looking to do some different colors on here. So that's one thing. The other thing that it's difficult to see, we're going to put joints in the stucco to help break that up. It isn't going to have the same articulation as the front.
Yeah, and I think that it's such an important location. It is your entrance. It is when somebody enters into our central business district, it's the first statement that's going to be seen. This is a statement building. I think you would agree. It's going to be a very significant visual impact. And I think that we really need to better understand how this is going to look from those perspectives, because this is what everyone's going to see when they first are welcomed into our historic central business district. Do you have that? I'm just interested in knowing how you might give it a little more attention, if you could.
Well, I mean, I'd have to discuss that with our team.
No,
As we know, every time we add that kind of detail, it costs money, and at some point...
No, I know it costs money, but, but for the village, it's what everybody will see. When you're on Cottage Place, you see if you're looking at the Board of Ed building, from each and every side is appointed with the same details, with the same architectural elements. So everywhere you stand, because you can see that particular building, you see it from every angle. It's not like there's another building blocking it visually, and so you see the beauty of the building everywhere you go. If you look at the Franklin Avenue building, that dark brick building. I think it has a name, actually. You see from all angles, you see the beautiful brickwork, you see the details, you see the appointments to the building. So I'm thinking that it needs a little more attention than this. It just looks like a wall of building. Okay. And then my last question on the front, on the Maple Ave side, those balconies, are those Romeo and Juliet? Are those intended to be doors opening on that end unit?
To the far right?
Yeah. I mean, it's beautiful. I'm just interested in
Yeah,
knowing.
they're Juliet balconies.
Is that what they're
can't
called,
put chairs
Juliet? Did I
out.
say Romeo and Juliet? I guess something like that. Okay. Yeah, Romeo's on the bottom, so only Juliet's up there. Okay, got it. Okay, all right. I'm good for right now. Good, thank you. Thanks, Bruce.
You're welcome.
Francis?
I don't have any questions, thank you.
Melanie?
What is the space between the building, once it's constructed, and the break-around the building? I think we came to some 0 feet, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this area right here is tight up against it. When it gets back here, there's parking. I don't know what that distance is. It's maybe 10, 15 feet.
I think it was 12 feet.
12 feet, okay.
Okay, that's all I had for the moment, if I can come back at another point.
Joel?
One question on your Maple Ave elevations. You have the Romeo and Juliet balcony, but you have those two areas that kind of project out on the left and right side. Where your hand is, yep, and then further down, yep. Keep going. Keep going.
All the way, the next gray one. You getting close? There.
Bang, yeah. Right, so you've articulated the elevation really nicely. You have the shadow lines, so it looks like those two areas project out from the building, right?
This area in gray is like a little bay window.
Yeah.
Projects out.
Yeah, so I guess and I think it's a nice detail, but I don't think it's reflected on your floor plans.
No, it's not. We haven't gone in and articulated that at this point.
How far are you anticipating that projecting, and did you include that projection in your square footage calculations?
That probably is not in the square footage calculations. I may say 6 to 8 inches it might project out.
6 to 8 inches?
Yeah.
Okay, it looks like more than that based on your shadow lines, but if that's what you're saying, then I guess that's okay. It'd be good if that kind of matched the plans. So on your plans, you have kind of tiny little projections that don't really match the elevations. So it's a little confusing.
Yeah, the lines that you see on the plan pretty much reflect these vertical offsets going in and out. We didn't get into the level of, detailing this yet because we haven't put together the unit plans.
Yeah, okay.
So that 6 to 8 inches is kind of a guesstimate at this
Okay.
point.
Like I said, it looked like 2 feet, but if you're saying it's less than that, that's cool. That's it, Rich.
Okay, thanks, Joel. All right, for the first floor with the residential and the parking there, is there some kind of ventilation that you have there in the parking deck to get rid of exhaust?
Typically, that's required, yes.
Okay. What are they, just fans that just push it out?
Yeah.
Okay. And with the units on top, you're going to have the louvers. Are they metal or are they painted, or what are they going to be made out of, and what color?
They're usually metal. I don't know the color at this point. They probably have like a baked-on anodized finish maybe, or...
Is it made to kind of blend in with the sky, or is
I would say when we do like our color selections, we put the whole palette together, the brick, the fascias, when we pull all that together, that's probably when we would pick the color of that. My guess is that it might match the cap on top of the parapet. We might take that color and use it for the louvers. Guessing it's probably like a darker, maybe a bronze color.
Okay. And when it's louvered, it's fully louvered that it would block the view totally, but it ventilates?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And when you showed the person standing on the road across the street looking up, is that an actual kind of estimation of the sight line, or is that just hypothetical?
I thought you recognized me.
I couldn't tell who that was then. Was that you, Todd?
No, that's the actual sight line.
Okay, that's actually what they're going to be seeing, and
Yes.
yeah, okay.
I can't fudge that.
All right. And I do like the mayor's comment on the statement building. You did a fantastic job on the front. It makes it tougher for you to do the other side, so you did a too good of job maybe, but maybe you can do something with those other sides. Really when you think about it, you're going to be revolving around the town when you come in around there, and you're really going to be picking up all those views there. So I think you have a good thing going, and you can make it better.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just jump in? I actually, there was one, can I just see that, your beautiful elevation? Yes, please. The vice chairman raised an issue on that front piece there that's projecting out. It's interesting because I too see the shadow, and I'm not sure how far it comes out, whether it's 6 inches or 8 inches. But just as a design element, it seems to be out of place to me, because everything else is sort of flat and really works so beautifully together. I just wondered, is it essential to your design? Is it essential to the floor plans? Or is it something that, maybe it's better if it weren't there? And I'm not looking to redesign your work because it's absolutely beautiful, but that piece just doesn't seem to fit to me.
It doesn't, I see your point. Mm-hmm. I think what we were doing is articulating an element over top of the garage entrance just to say, hey, here's an important point.
I guess you don't want a neon parking here.
I think that if that went away and we just saw that brick facade there, I think it would be just fine.
I think it would be so much, absolutely gorgeous. Simple. Yeah, I think it would be beautiful that way. Okay.
Can I ask one more question? I'm sorry. Up on the top deck area where there's, the seating in front of the windows, I believe this got brought up at some point. I'm not 100% sure if I heard an answer, but is there any blocking at all of the windows in the units along that upper rooftop deck area from where people are sitting?
Up here?
Yeah, up there.
We're showing windows up there, but if we looked at the plan, you will see that most of that is a hallway. So you're walking down a hallway that has a lot of windows in it.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
No, yeah, I thought somebody had brought that up before, and we had decided there were windows to units, but that's significantly better. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How high was the parapet again on the balcony? Like if you're up on the balcony? There.
Up here?
Yeah.
It's going to vary because you see it going up and down.
Yeah.
The requirement so that nobody falls over the edge is 3 feet 6 inches.
Yep.
Okay. Now we could have this at some points lower, like this one looks a little bit lower. So we could have maybe a horizontal bar, anything that gets you up to that 3'6" height. I'm going to say they're going to vary between 2.5 feet to maybe up to 4 feet when you get to like the top of that, maybe even higher at that point.
Okay. All right. Yes.
If you're going to need to add a safety railing across that top floor where the terrace is, I'd like to ask that detail be added to the plans just so that we can review that to make sure it continues or is consistent with your architectural treatment and the style of the building.
Yeah, I don't think that would be sitting on top of the parapet. I think it'd be pulled back. Yeah, but we can show that.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful just so we have confirmation of how that is going
it
to
would
appear
be,
or if it's going to be visible.
Yeah, and it would kind of be colored in a way that it disappears.
Good. Thanks.
Okay, did anyone else have questions? All right, Beth, you can start off with questions if you want. That's okay.
I actually don't have any additional questions. I had issued a memo on this application dated August 14th, and in there were a variety of architectural comments, but as of the last meeting, with one exception that was answered during the meeting, all of those comments had already been satisfied, and given the comments and questions we've heard this evening, I have nothing additional at this time.
Okay, sure.
Mr. Brunage, the planner remains sworn and qualified.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
The planner remains sworn and qualified, correct? Ms. McManus? I believe she...
Sure,
yes,
absolutely.
since last time.
Yeah.
We do have a new face, though. Mr. Rudishauser is not here, so. You raise your right hand, sir. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. And just state your name and your business address.
Jovan Mahanzik, Village of Ridgewood Assistant Engineer, and the address is 131 North Maple Avenue, Ridgewood, New Jersey.
Thank you, Jovan. And you're a professional engineer?
No, I'm not.
Okay, and you're here through the professional engineer, Chris Rudishauser, correct?
Just for his eyes, yes.
Okay, all right. Do you have any questions? Or?
No, thank you.
Okay.
All right, so no questions for the architect?
No.
Okay. John, did you have any questions for the architect?
Mr. Joe, I don't know if we swore you yet. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And John Jar, traffic expert, Mr. Brunage, you stipulate? Thank you. Go ahead.
He said okay more than once to me, so I have to give him credit for that. So I only had two very minor questions. One is, I always have concerns when we have the parking structures and whatnot. Have you shown the site triangles? Are we sure we have good, clear sight lines? When I was looking at the plan, it looked there's some plantings and some other things. Can you make sure that on the plan you show the sight lines so that we know that we have that for the future?
Yeah, Mr. Dipple happens to be here again this evening, and I believe he'll be happy to testify that the current version of the plans show the sight lines.
Perfect. That's the only thing that has to do with the actual architecture part itself. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thanks, John. Does anyone from the public have any questions for the architect? Okay, seeing there are none, you can call your next witness.
Thank you. Art Keller.
Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And just your full name and your business address.
Certainly. Eric L. Keller, Keller, Bowman Consulting, 54 Horse Hill Road, Cedar Knolls, New Jersey.
Mr. Keller, be kind enough, if you would, to tell the board a bit about your background, your training, your education, and whether or not you hold any current licenses here in the state of New Jersey or any other jurisdiction.
Certainly. Professional engineer in the state of New Jersey since 1987. I'm also a licensed engineer in New York and Pennsylvania. I'm a licensed planner in the state of New Jersey, though I'm not testifying as a planner this evening. I appeared before this board several times, have appeared before many boards throughout Bergen County and other parts of the state and other states, and have worked on similar projects in a number of jurisdictions.
And Mr. Brunage, Mr. Keller's being offered as a professional engineer with a... I believe so accepted. Mr. Jar, any voir dire or no issues? Mr. Keller, you're accepted as a traffic professional.
Seemed to indicate that he accepted his profession.
Yes, in a good way. Thank you, Mr. Brunage.
May I ask that this particular report be marked as the next exhibit?
AR approval?
Yes, I am.
What is it?
It's the traffic report prepared by myself on this application.
And what, if anything, did you do with that that report after you prepared it, other than sending it to the client and me?
Since then, I've read it, I've prepared for this evening.
And did you send it to the Village of Ridgewood and to their consultant?
I believe so, through your office.
Okay. Tell us, if you will, what precisely, or not, shouldn't say precisely, what your role was on this development team and what your purpose of appearing here this evening is with respect to this application.
Our purpose is twofold on this application. One is to assess the traffic impacts of the
redevelopment of this site, and also to look at the parking, and in particular prepare a shared parking analysis for this mixed-use project.
In preparing for this evening, did you look at any, or have you had an opportunity over the years to prepare any other traffic studies?
Yes, I prepared a traffic study. The original traffic study was in January of 2013. We prepared an amendment in May of 2014, which included a full range of traffic counts, which I discussed with Mr. Jar. We compared that data from 2013 to more current counts that Mr. Jar has in his records, and found that over the past couple of years that the peak hour traffic volumes have not changed to any degree. So we have used those original counts as the basis for our analysis, but made the appropriate adjustments for time in accordance with DOT standards. Growth rates, our study also included the other developments, Dayton, Chestnut Village, and the KS Broad application. All those traffic counts, or the site-generated traffic from those developments, is included in our no-build calculations for this site.
Now, Mr. Jar is here this evening, and I know that you've already testified that you've had some dialogue and conversation with him with respect to your report and your conclusions. Is that correct?
Yes.
And are you aware of a letter dated September 7, 2017, prepared by Mr. Jar, signed by him, and addressed to the board?
Yes, I am.
In that letter, a number of comments are made by Mr. Jar, and essentially he has concluded or asked that you address certain points, if you would, to inform the board as to just what went on in you doing the calculations necessary to come to the conclusions that you're ultimately going to
Certainly. Starting with number one of his traffic analysis comments, we followed standard trip generation calculation procedures for these sites because they're not on a state highway. We use the ITE trip generation manual. In this case, the 9th edition. The DOT has their own rates for certain uses, but we have not used those in this case. And even if we had, because there's retail on the property today, and we're reducing that by almost 16,000 square feet of retail that's being removed. That's a Hallmark floor building, and then some of the retail space within the existing building. That's being removed. So if we used a different trip generation rate, the comparison between the two is the same. Maybe the number in absolute is higher, but all we're doing is looking at the differential. So the trip generation would come out the same. But we did use ITE basic data. As we have on other applications in a downtown area such as this, we presented two measures of trip generation. We did it without a mass transit component. We used the standard ITE trip generation rates, which are for more suburban location where you don't have the bus service, the rail service that you do in Ridgewood. Really, the numbers are fairly small when we look at just the proposed residential uses. Forget about what's there today and how much of the office and retail space we're removing. We are removing just under 14,000 square feet of office space out of this building. If you just look at how much traffic is being generated by the proposed residential uses, we're looking at 18 trips in the morning peak hour, 24 trips in the PM peak hour, and 24 Saturday trips. We're looking at very low traffic volumes because of the residential use. So overall, when you look at the removal of the commercial space in the building, there's actually a decrease in the trip generation generated by this site based on ITE rates. We did not do that in our analysis. We took no credit. We counted the traffic, and that traffic that we counted at East Ridgewood and North Maple, and North Maple and Franklin, includes the traffic that goes to and from this site today. We didn't deduct anything. All we did was add the residential traffic. So our analyses are conservative in the fact that we didn't deduct any traffic. We just added more.
And when you essentially, I guess, you eventually compared a no-build situation to the build situation, did you not?
That's correct. And that's the incremental effect. There's going to be some level of traffic on the roadways. There's level of traffic today. We're assuming that there's going to be more, as Mr. Jarrett noted in item 3 of his report. We used a 2% growth rate. The latest DOT growth rate factors say we should have only used a 1% growth factor. So again, we were conservative in growing that traffic that's not from specific developments. It's from other developments that haven't been factored in. Plus, we added the 3 other developments.
Well, I think you ought to, this is probably just as good a time as any to tell the board your familiarity and whether or not that your familiarity with the existing conditions, mass transit opportunities, and the other developments that are taking place in the village, the impact of those on this particular project and its traffic.
Well, as I said, the board's seen me before on the KS Broad application, so we're very familiar with the traffic that's generated by that. This site obviously is a little bit further from the train station than the KS Broad site, but it's still a 9-minute walk. So it is certainly a walkable distance from this site to the train station. There's a bus stop outside the door, so there is, which is bus service to New York City. So there is good mass transit opportunities in the area and serving this particular site.
I'm going to turn your attention then back to Mr. Jarr's September 7th letter. In item number 2, he states that he has reviewed the engineer's trip generation and distribution, and he was wondering whether you could please provide some testimony regarding the operation of the site's access points. So if you could identify those access points and talk to that particular issue, that would be helpful.
I have Exhibit AR7 on the easel. There are 2 proposed access points and an existing one that will remain. We have the existing 2-way driveway from East Ridgewood Avenue, which will remain as it does today. The existing exit only from the existing parking underneath the Seal Funds building goes away and is replaced by a new driveway, generally where the driveway is to the surface parking lot for the Hallmark building, which will permit only right in and right out onto North Maple. That garage access leads to that same level of parking as is underneath the Seal Fonds building. Which this is Exhibit AR10A. The existing parking underneath the Seal Fonds building, there's a 2-way connection to the new parking level below the building addition, which is all integrated, total of 84 parking spaces on that level. You then have another driveway, new driveway to Franklin Avenue. This driveway serves the upper level of parking. This parking area is limited to the residential units. There are 47 parking spaces on that level for the 39 dwelling units in the building addition. Our analysis in our report assumed that this was a right-in, right-out. Mr. Jarr has opined on what he thinks should happen here. Myself, the applicant, would like to have the left in. We're not even thinking about a left out. And the reason for the left in is If you don't have the left in, and understanding that there could be some queuing issues, is that people are then forced to drive around the block, and it makes it inconvenient. We certainly don't want to create an unsafe condition, but there are other similar situations to this where you have driveways in the vicinity of intersections, and I mean, this is a fair distance back from the stop bars, and we don't think it's unreasonable to have the left turns in. That's our request. Obviously, the village has their opinion, and ultimately Franklin Avenue is a county road, and I know that the county planning board will have their opinions.
Well, before we delve too deeply into whether or not a left onto the site from Franklin we should get into detail, let's continue on with the more course of issues, if you will, for the particular project. So, and I'm going to skip over number 4 in Mr. Jar's letter and go to the shared parking analysis, which I think really requires you to maybe talk a little bit about existing parking on site, and then the proposed parking on site, and whether or not that results in a deficiency, and any opinions that you might have with respect to that.
Well, let's start with where we are today. The existing uses on the property, based on the village code, require 181 parking spaces. There are 76 parking spaces today. So the current uses on the subject property have a parking shortfall by ordinance of 105 parking spaces. Now, there are obviously shared parking opportunities that exist today because of the office and retail space, more so on a Saturday than on a weekday, but the not as great with the proposed use. Now we're introducing a residential use. So the residential parking characteristics are really almost 180 degrees opposite from commercial parking, or at least office parking. Based on, again, the village code, the proposed uses would require 141 parking spaces when we add up the individual uses just by math, and 131 spaces are provided. It's a shortfall of 10. Factor of 10, we've improved the parking condition on the site.
And that's a variance that the applicant is asking for.
Correct. If it's necessary, because when we look at shared parking, which is contained in tables, I believe it's 7, 8, and 9, 6, 7, 8, and 9 of my report. 6 and 7 talk about the existing conditions. Table 6, and this is after page 9. Table 6 is the weekday. Table 7 is the weekend. This uses the village's parking requirements and then looks at the temporal differential of parking demand by use by time of day. So on a weekday with shared parking, we're still 96 spaces short of what would be required. On a Saturday, because the office use essentially goes to nothing, we're 32 spaces short. Table 8 now introduces, first off, there's a significant reduction in office and retail square footage on the property. So that reduces the demand for those two components. We then add in the parking demand for the residential units. And what we've done, because the residential units, the residents themselves will have their reserved parking. So we've only looked at that parking that would exceed the capacity of the upper level lot. And what we find is that at a minimum, we will have 41 extra spaces. We'll have a surplus of 41 spaces at 8 p.m. on a weekday. This is in Table 8. In the common area, that's total for the site. In the common area, we have at least 22 spaces available at the peak time, which would be at noontime. Table 9 is a Saturday, and in this, because the office demand essentially again goes to zero, the parking surplus in the common and for the site as a whole occurs at the same time, again at noon time, and we have at least 37 spaces available based on shared parking. At other hours of the day, when the demand is less, we have more parking available. So while we sum the parking demand of the individual uses based on village code, when we look at it based on the hourly variation of parking demand, we have a significant surplus of parking, so there is no shortfall in my opinion.
I think it's important that you point out, or I'd ask you to point out just how you went about doing that calculation and which standard you used, because I know you relied upon the village ordinance, but comparing that, for example, with the ITE Parking Generation Manual, the 4th edition, there's a difference there, is there not?
Yes, the ITE Parking Generation Manual, and I'll take a step back. The ITE Parking Generation Manual, like the Trip Generation Manual, is a compilation of parking demand studies that have been done at existing uses throughout the country, and said they go out and count cars and how many cars are parked in the lot, and they take the average of the peaks. So they don't take the average of every observation. They take the average of the peak demand at these uses and come up with an average peak parking demand based on land use, like we do for trip generation. And what that document has found is that the retail demand, your ordinance requires 4 spaces per 1,000. The ITE parking generation on a Friday, because Friday has a higher parking demand than a weekday, is just under 3 for retail. For an office building, it is, I can find my right, I believe it is 2 point, 2 point something.
I don't have that here.
2.84, and that's on a weekday. So the ITE Parking Generation Manual has found that the actual observed peak parking demands are less than your code requires. But we didn't use that in our analysis. Wanted to take, again, a conservative approach. We used the standard demands. Now, your ordinance also uses the standard RSIS parking requirements for residential uses, which again is a suburban parking demand, and doesn't account for a transit-oriented development, a downtown development where you may have less and likely have less parking demand from the residential traffic. But again, we use those same RSIS rates in our analysis.
So I guess what I'd ask you at this point is it your testimony then that the shared parking, the way you analyzed it using these very conservative approaches, there really is no need for a variance, in your opinion?
In my opinion, there is not.
But if there is, the request would be for 10 spaces, which is the perceived shortfall depending on how you want to calculate the demand, or the
Correct.
need rather, I should say.
You take a straight mathematical approach of the sum minus the demand, yes, it's 10.
Thank you. Mr. Jarr speaks in point 4 in his letter to capacity analyses using the highway capacity software. And he says he's reviewed the analyses. He's asking that you provide a capacity analysis for existing conditions so he can perform a more thorough review of the proposed development. Has that information been provided him, do you know?
It has not, but I will give that to him. I didn't include it in here because it was in the original report, and I'm not sure Mr. Jarr reviewed our original report from 3 years ago. He might have, I don't know. But it's easy enough to give it to him.
He makes comment as well with respect to the traffic signal that is located at East Ridgewood Avenue, North Maple Avenue. And he concludes that it's currently under a heavy strain, as he calls it, heavy strain due to existing traffic volumes. any traffic added to the adjacent roadways or overlap in peak hour traffic will have an effect at that intersection. So please, if you would, based on your professional experience and what you have concluded in your report, talk about just how you are advising the developer to deal with this issue, and what, in your professional opinion, is the proper approach to deal with the issues of the signalization at Franklin and North Maple.
Well, his memo says East Ridgewood and North Maple.
I'm sorry,
which,
you're right.
I mean, again, we have a small amount of traffic added there. We received a memorandum from the village engineer about an improvement that the village undertook there. I drove through there this evening, happened to catch that lead southbound left, zipped right through, it was perfect. So there is an improvement that the village has taken on at that location to deal with the southbound left turn movement, and that would obviously benefit the flow at that location. Now, North Maple and Franklin is challenged. It's challenged today. I'm not going to tell any of you what you don't already know because you drive through it every day. It's challenged for a couple reasons. One, you have an offset intersection, which, because of its offset, it's a three-phase signal. The east side of Franklin Avenue goes, the west side goes, and then North Maple goes. And if you're coming up from East Ridgewood Avenue and you want to make a left onto Franklin, you're going to sit there for a while because there is no left turn arrow for that. The signal, like a lot in the village, is pre-timed. So even if there's nobody on Franklin Avenue on the eastbound side, you have to wait because it runs through its cycle. So what we had shown in our report, and this is summarized in Table 5 on page 8, we looked at a mitigation measure that would include the addition of a northbound left turn movement on North Maple so that those people who want to go on to Franklin get a lead green like you now have at East Ridgewood Avenue, putting in an actuated controller and making some adjustments to the green time. And with those changes, you go from the level service E and F that you have on various approaches today to better than level service D on all the approaches. Now, we've also looked at what is the incremental impact of the subject development at that location. And as I said in my testimony, this project with the reduction in office and retail space would end up with a net reduction in traffic. Even looking at it with the residential, the amount of traffic that's added to that intersection is fairly small. So the problem exists today. It's only going to get worse in the future as traffic grows, and this project has a very, very small incremental impact at that intersection.
When we speak about off-track improvements in the business that we're all in, we normally talk about the logical or reasonable nexus between the project itself and the proposed improvement or impact assessment. What's your opinion, if any, on whether or not there is such an impact?
There really isn't. I mean, we're looking at very small traffic volumes being added just from the residential use, and then when you deduct for the loss, the 28-some thousand square feet of commercial space that's being removed, there's a net reduction in traffic from this project as a whole. But again, I've been conservative. You just look at the residential traffic, you're adding, total for the project, 24 trips in the PM peak hour, which is the most critical. And of those, we're looking at 15 trips that go through Franklin and North Maple out of the total that's there today, which is 1,400.
No. Well, I've directed you to a sort of a legal standard, and I guess there's a practical aspect of this as well. Are you asking, or in your professional opinion, should this board sort of ignore whether or not there's any real improvement to the proposed development that will benefit from the improved signalization at that particular intersection?
Well, I mean, the board has their opinion as to what should be done, can be done. All I'm saying from an engineering perspective is that the rational nexus, the fair share contribution at that location based on trip generation and trip volume is small and practically negligible.
Let's get right to the heart of the matter then. Have you made a recommendation to the client as to whether or not a contribution based on that fair share is appropriate, and if so, how much or what?
Well, we have discussed it, and my discussions with the applicant is that he would be willing to, based on what we think the improvements overall need to be, would be willing to make a fair share contribution to that improvements to that intersection of $50,000, which is 20% of what we have estimated as the overall intersection improvement would be.
So let's just circle back then and go back to the site itself and to sort of a summary restatement of what you've looked at to get to the conclusions you came to. You've examined the site plan as proposed.
Yes.
You understand the access points as proposed.
Yes.
You've done a review of the parking that is proposed. That's correct?
Yes.
And the traffic movements onto and from the site, as well as traffic in the immediate neighborhood. You've analyzed that as well.
Yes, we have.
Have you formed a professional opinion as to whether or not the project as proposed works from your point of view?
From a traffic and parking point of view, this project will work. It will not have an impact on the adjacent street system and can be accommodated without burdening the operations of the existing signals.
No further questions of this witness at this time?
Okay, thank you. All right, Jeff, you can start off the questioning.
Yeah, so here's my question and my concern. You're using the town ordinances for the number of spaces per square footage. It's what, one space for every 250 square feet, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. The problem that may occur is that office space may have a higher intensity of use depending upon who rents it. So as an example, if you have a realtor there and the realtor uses the office space, you can guarantee that it's going to be more than one car for every 250 square feet. As a matter of fact, it's probably going to be triple, 5 times that. So that's one issue. It depends upon who's going to rent the space. Again, if you take a look at the retail space, if the retail space is a restaurant, if you look at other ordinances in other towns, they typically have for every 3 seats in a restaurant or every 2 seats in a restaurant, you need 1 parking space. So if you put a restaurant in there, and if you have 60 to 100 seats, that's going to increase the number of spaces that you're going to need for people to park. So my concern is the analysis, while you say it's fair, a more fair way to do it, or a more fair way to look at it, is let's look at it a worst-case scenario. Let's assume that a realtor goes into that office space, and let's assume that a restaurant goes into the retail space, and let's assume that the ordinances that we don't have on our books, but others in other municipalities do, let's use those ordinances to determine the number of spaces that are needed. So I think that your estimate, to be honest with you, is probably underestimated as to the number of spaces that are needed there. And it's probably significantly higher. So I think for our own edification and for our own use, it would be important for you to look at Probably a worst-case scenario. Let's see what happens there. That would be my suggestion.
Well,
Council, excuse me. Is that a question, sir?
It is. No, actually, it's a recommendation. So, the other thing I'm looking at, and I'm having a hard time understanding this, I'm looking at Table 5 on page 8 of your report, and you look at, as an example, northbound North Maple left, and you're saying if we mitigate the intersection, if we do your improvements, we're going to improve the time waiting there by 5 to 8-fold. I'm having a tough time trying to get my hands around how bad it is now and how much better you're going to make it based on your mitigation. I just, the math to me is a little fuzzy. I'm having a tough time understanding how you can make it that much better than what it currently is.
Okay. Well, that's a Saturday condition.
Even at a PM situation, you're looking at improving it 5-fold. I mean, I'm just having a tough time understanding how you can make it that much better.
Okay. Well, we'll look at PM and we'll look at Saturday.
Yeah, help me understand that, because I don't get it. You don't have to answer the question now, but I'm having a tough time.
I'm going to try and answer your question, and hopefully my explanation will help bring some light to this. You have almost 200 left turns in both the PM peak hour and in the Saturday peak hour, trying to make that left onto Franklin Avenue. Now, those 200 left turns are opposed by, because the left turns are also going to be impacted by people coming down from this building to make a right onto Franklin. So if I look at, in the PM peak hour, we have 470 cars coming south, and I'm trying to put 200 cars across that 400. That's a lot of traffic that are at odds. And on a Saturday, we have 500 cars against those 200. So you got a lot of conflict there. By providing a lead left turn, you can get 4, 5, 6 cars making a left every cycle, which means that there's very few cars that now come up northbound that are going to be in conflict with those, because they're going to have their own left turn, like you now have if you turn around and go south on North Maple and make the left onto East Ridgewood Avenue. You have that lead arrow, and you're not conflicted by people coming the other way because they still have a red light. We're doing the same thing here, just in the opposite direction. So those left turns no longer have as much impedance because of opposing traffic, and that's why the left turn movement, the level of service improves by a factor of 5 to 8.
I'm wondering if, John, you don't have to do it at this point, but I'd love you to opine on that. I'm just having a tough time getting my hand around how you can make it that much better. So the other question I have is the fair share contribution of $50,000, and that's for the intersection, the Maple Franklin intersection. Is that right?
Correct.
So what's the total cost of that improvement?
I mean, we haven't done a detailed analysis, but knowing improvements of that type for that type of an intersection, you're looking at $250,000.
So the village has to eat the $200,000. Is that right? I don't know what the money's coming from.
Yes.
So the village would eat it. Yeah. Oh, okay. So the other concern we had, and this was talked about at the KS Broad situation, is that the Franklin Ave is kind of a conduit east to west, and it's a county road, and there are 5 lights on that road. Okay, and so you can certainly improve this particular intersection, but then you've just messed up all the other 4. So the issue that we have, I think, from this town standpoint, and this is where we're having a tough time, I think, with trying to figure this out, is you can improve the one, but you're going to make the other 3 or 4 lights probably even worse. And so the question we have is, who's paying for that? And, if you're asking the village to contribute to those 5 lights, I'm not sure that's so fair for us to bear the brunt of these developments. And, we're hoping at some point that the developers, and, there's probably a couple that are working on this, that they would probably contribute a bit more than the 50,000. I mean, because that, again, it's an unfair ask, to be honest with you, to have the village really bear the brunt of this. That's just a general comment. I don't think it's right. So.
Well, I'm going to ask that Mr. Keller not respond to that question. But if it is a question, I don't think it's a question. I think it's a statement. But I understand what you're saying. We've told you what our position is. We believe that the law requires us to deal with improvements off track that can be logically tied and is a nexus between the project and its impacts and the proposed improvement. Beyond that, to engage in the dialogue that you're suggesting would be negotiating approval. That's frowned upon by the case law, and it's not something that we're going to participate in.
Thank you.
Just a brief, in terms of Councilman Voigt's question. Mr. Keller, when I look at you sometimes I think of the other application. I apologize when I actually swore you in. Again, another great presentation, and Mr. Jor can talk about this, and everything's different, I understand that, but I believe up the road on Franklin, the improvement was approximately $400,000 that I believe Schreier and yourself were talking about for that light. I just didn't, and your estimate was, based upon your professional experience, $250,000. Is there any support for that, or you or Mr. Draw? I don't care. The point is I'm trying to get the board to get it right, because obviously when you said $50,000, 20% of that is $250,000. I agree with Mr. Brunage. We're not negotiating at this point on the board. It's a fair question, though. Where the heck do you come up with $250,000 as opposed to $400,000 or $150,000?
Well, I think Mr. Fran's 400 was not just the signal improvement at a location. It was...
installation, perhaps?
No. We talk about installation costs, and when we do these based on public bidding prices. We don't do it. But it was the coordination of the signals. It was handicap improvements. It's a little bit more complicated at North Broad and Franklin because of the railroad overpass. You need a few extra signal heads, but it was more than just the traffic signal was the 400,000, and that was his number, it was not mine. I think the 400,000 was on the heavy side. I've designed, I can't tell you how many traffic signals, bid them out, built them. $250,000 gets you a really nice traffic signal.
You and Mr. Jar could probably come up with some fair estimate somehow, right?
I think we can.
Because I know, as you say, you're very fair about challenged in terms of the area. And I remember as a kid sitting in between the front seats, looking out the windshield and from the back, and that turn that it's been there for 1,000 years. So I'm not that old, but it's a challenging area. So I think the board has a concern.
I did have one last question. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Sure.
It relates to the left turns, and that's the one on Franklin going into going across Franklin into the development itself at that driveway. But it's left turns everywhere in this particular development that are probably going to be a concern. It's a left turn on Maple, across Maple, going into that driveway.
No, this is right in, right out.
Right in, right out only.
Oh, it's right in, okay.
Yep.
And then the other one on the other side, left turn there, that's...
There is a left turn there today.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a problem or not.
Not a lot of people use it.
Yeah.
And one thing, I'm sorry to interrupt, one thing that we didn't do in our analysis, and Mayor, you brought this up, there is a connection to the Cottage Place municipal lot. I'm having trouble talking tonight. We didn't assume any traffic was going in and out of there for our development.
And you shouldn't.
Right.
We didn't.
I know. That was sarcasm, and you shouldn't. It's better not.
So, but we saw very few left turns into the site from East Ridgewood, but it is a permitted movement.
And I think Mr. Brunage, just the other area, right turn only was stipulated by your engineer last time that they would make that.
That's correct, right turn,
Right in,
right out on Maple, and I believe there was testimony with respect to right in, right out. I think what's happened is the engineer has spoke with the client. I haven't had a conversation with the client to determine whether or not he was here. I don't see him at this point, so I'll get that clarified as to where we are on the left-hand movement. But I think we can delve into that with Mr. Keller.
Thank you.
Okay, okay, Dave?
The existing signaling at Franklin and Maple does not have pedestrian signals, or does it?
It does not.
So is adding pedestrian signals part of your estimate?
Yes.
How does that impact the amount of vehicular traffic that can go through that intersection?
We didn't do pedestrian counts. There was some observations made, or the notes were that there was not a substantial amount of pedestrian traffic, at least during the peak hour times. From what was observed, you do have crosswalks across both legs of Franklin Avenue and across the north side of North Maple above Franklin. What happens with that is that it's part of the phasing. The only approach that's fairly wide, where you might need a little bit extra time for a pedestrian to cross, is the western half of Franklin Avenue. But that's part of the timing. There's a different timing program for pedestrians to make sure that they have enough time to cross. But that wouldn't affect that lead left for northbound, because pedestrians can't cross when there's a lead left. Whether they pay attention to the red hand is another story. But they would not be permitted to cross by the signal, and then they would cross when there's the flow of traffic in a north and south direction. It has some impact on volumes, but it's not material because it's not a consistent heavy flow during the peak hour.
Peak hour is what? What time?
From our counts, the AM peak hour was 8:30 to 9:30, PM 5 to 6, and on Saturday 12 to 1 p.m.
Yeah, my own observation is that the peak for pedestrian traffic is actually in the middle of the day because it's high school students.
Right. So there's more pedestrian traffic, but there's less vehicular. So giving them more time to cross doesn't negatively impact traffic flow because you have lower traffic volumes.
The other question I had was, again, about the right-in, right-out only. This forces people to go around the block, and I think that means more turns at the intersections of Cottage Place. And both of those intersections are controlled only by a stop sign. And I'm just wondering if this is going to raise the hazard level for pedestrians.
No, and the traffic that might go to Cottage Place is going to be the right turn movements. Because they can't make a left in here or a left in here. I mean, if they can't make the left in here, they're actually going to come in on East Ridgewood, because this driveway, the East Ridgewood driveway and the North Maple driveway lead to the same parking area. So you have flexibility for that lower level, which is the larger parking lot. They have multiple locations to get in. The one that's a little bit more circuitous, which is why I had to put in my 2 cents of asking for the left turn in, is this lot, which is residential only. If it's right in, right out, if somebody's coming from East Ridgewood and would otherwise make a left in, they have to go around the block. But it's a handful of cars. I mean, we're looking at 47 spaces, and in a peak hour, you're probably looking at, that want to come in that way, 5, 6 cars. So it's not a material impact on.
The problem I see with the left in on the Franklin Avenue entrance is that your queued traffic for the eastbound traffic on Franklin at that light is almost always queued up past that point.
Today, yes, because of the operation of that signal, the pre-time signal. If there's an improvement to it, it would improve. The queues would be reduced. As a traffic engineer, what I look at is giving the person the flexibility to make a decision as to what they're comfortable with. And somebody may say, I don't want to make that left. I'm going to go around the block and make the right in. But if somebody else wants to do it, that's the way I approach and have approached, design aspects since I've gotten into this business. That's what I look at.
Yeah. So there's really 2 distinct parking areas.
Correct.
And are the parking spaces assigned? Are the residents going to be all using the Franklin Avenue entrance?
Well, I don't know if they're going to be assigned, but that upper level is for residents only. And there's 1.2 spaces per unit. So obviously every unit gets 1 space in that level. How they decide to get, the extra 10 spaces, probably go to the bigger units. But I don't know specifically, but every unit will have 1 space in that upper level, and then there's a couple extra.
The reason I ask that is, are there going to be people who are compelled to use that Franklin Avenue entrance?
Yeah, I mean, all the residents will have 1 space in that level.
Okay.
So, and when we did our trip assignment, we accounted for that separately, knowing that the residential traffic would be going to that level.
So those are the people who, if we don't have the left enter, those are the people who are going to be going around the block.
Right. And the applicant has indicated to me it's right in, right out. So forget what I said. It's right in, right out on Franklin.
That's it.
I have no questions.
Sorry.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions. The retail space existing, not in the Seal Fonds building, but in the part where there's the Hallmark, and then there's the other space downstairs, which is the Arthur Murray Dance Studio.
Yes.
Do you know how much space is allocated to the Arthur Murray Dance Studio?
I don't know the individual breakdown within the building.
So when you contemplated that as you contemplated that as retail space, so that's how you were doing your calculations. Would that be on a no build? Is that how that works?
Well, we treated it. We have the Arthur Murray space. We treated it as retail, both in the current condition and it's gone in the after condition. But we treated it as all retail space.
Okay. I mean, the only reason I asked that question is because that was formerly a B2 zone. Then it became the B3R zone. So this is now a B3R zone, but as the B2 zone, only retail would be permitted on the first floor. But that particular business, my recollection is, had a variance to operate because that's a second floor business because it's a low impact dance studio. And technically it's not retail. So I didn't know if that would change much or
No, and that's why I said when we did our trip generation.
Right, you didn't, right.
I didn't deduct anything for the existing uses.
I wanted to ask about the intersection, that crazy intersection. When you're looking at improvements, and I guess presumably there'll be more pedestrian traffic generated for 2 reasons, because you're adding all the residential units, but also because disabled special needs housing component is, and I know that Tom is back there, but it's a more of an independent oriented special needs housing. So the individuals that would reside there are more functioning independent. So again, presumably there's more pedestrian traffic. And I just would be interested in understanding how you might improve the intersection for pedestrian safety. And the reason I ask this is I walk all the time. And the other day I was on my way to the Board of Ed building and I realized that to get from my point A to point B, I actually had to cross 3 roads to get to the corner, which I should have only had to make one movement for. So if you could just elaborate how that could work.
You have 3 crosswalks, one across each leg of Franklin and then one across North Maple.
Right, and if I'm on the southeast corner,
Over
right,
here.
I'm right there.
Okay.
I can't just cross.
You can't cross North Maple.
I can't cross there.
No.
I have to cross first, I have to cross second, I have to cross back to get. So I just want to know, is that, make sense?
No, I know, he's like, it's just
Yeah.
how it's set up.
Well, and it's also knowing.
No, I just want to know
The
if an improved light, signalized light would, with pedestrian movement would, and it's a question having, I guess, unrelated, but if that would then allow that crosswalk to be installed there, is that something you foresee is?
It's hard to understand why the county may not have permitted it there. Part of it is putting a crosswalk here. That crosswalk can't be used when the western leg of Franklin goes, and it can't be used when North Maple goes.
Yeah.
It would have to be tied to the signal for the east half of Franklin Avenue. I think it's possible, but that needs county input.
Right.
But what we're looking at is pedestrian push buttons, so you hit the button and you have the new pedestrian heads, which will have the little man walking and white lights, the hand in red, and a countdown timer so that you know how much time you have before you need to run out of the street.
Okay. Just going back to that Cottage Place lot and that 19-foot opening, is there a reason that you didn't use that in your analysis of who might pass through there? Is that because it's technically shouldn't be used?
I just wanted to be conservative.
Okay.
And put as much traffic out to North Maple and East Ridgewood.
Okay.
And Franklin.
So, okay. But if that were open like that, people would use it. Would that be fair?
I'm sure they use it today.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
And they will be
Not
able
much
to
going
use it
on there
tomorrow.
right now. Yeah. Okay. The next question, going back to that left turn in, or right in, right out.
It's right in, right out.
Yeah. And, so I'm just interested in knowing so now there's cars that are coming, they're actually passing through. If everyone's got to go right in, right out, as opposed to left, now they have to do passes through lights, additional passes that otherwise they wouldn't have done. Is that accurate? Because if someone came, we're heading south on Maple, and they made a right into Franklin and then a left into that lot? Okay.
Yes.
But now if you don't permit that, now they're going straight, and now those trips are added to the Maple Avenue.
That's why I did my analysis.
Okay.
I didn't account for lefts in. So it's
Okay,
already
so it's
counted
already
for in the
accounted for.
analysis.
So then, in other words, if it were left in, then that would be reduced significantly, or what would
A
that?
handful of cars.
Handful of cars, okay.
Yeah.
And then just again, the distance from that right in, right out to the distance from that driveway to the southwest corner, like in terms of car lengths or physical length.
From the driveway to the stop bar?
Yeah, that's fine, that's perfect, sure. The stop bar actually makes sense. What's the distance and how many car lengths would that be?
It's about 6 car lengths, it's 120 feet.
So any improvement at the light, even if it were improving it significantly, wouldn't prevent that. That's not a lot of cars to queue there pretty quickly. I mean, it's not like it's a lot. So any improvement to the light there wouldn't impact that considerably. Because, I mean, you're talking that they're still going to have to wait for the lights, so 5 cars to get in line isn't really a lot. If there were 20 cars, I would agree. But I think with only 5 cars, it's really not.
The separation meets design standards. You have to have a minimum of 100 feet from a stop wire to a driveway, which we do comply with. There is some improvement, particularly during the Saturday. But it still, with a right out, I mean, some of it may depend on what we call courtesy gaps. The person on Franklin allowing the person to come out.
Right.
But again, we're not looking at a lot of traffic in that level coming out. The peak time is the morning, and in the morning is when the traffic on that leg of Franklin is at its lowest level. So we're looking at in this case, a car every 5 or 6 minutes coming out of that driveway.
Yeah. Okay, I don't have any other questions right now.
Francis?
I don't have any questions.
Melanie?
I think we asked some of these questions the first time around, but is there a way or any plan in place to block that driveway from anybody off the street parking in that upper level coming in off of Franklin?
Okay.
Nothing in place?
Nothing.
Okay. Because there was no turnaround up in there also, like if somebody were to get up, wasn't it that there was nowhere for any?
The turnaround issue was on the lower level, and that's been redesigned based on a comment from your planner. So there is turnaround. The upper level has circulation.
Okay. The right turn in, right turn out, I guess that's really kind of been covered. I actually wouldn't care if there was a left turn out of there at all, because honestly, the queue would be up into to that level, and that would be the residents' issue to deal with, I would think, and not the street. But that's a whole nother, I guess that's been dealt with already also. Would this $50,000 towards the signal as the contribution, is that in addition to any striping on the streets for crosswalks and sidewalks upgrades that are going to be needed in the area?
The $250,000 estimate includes striping, heads, traffic signal improvements. That's the whole signal. So the $50,000
was your contribution?
Was the applicant's contribution. What he indicated to me he was willing to contribute.
And you dispute the $400,000 estimate towards those lights? Because that, I believe a couple different, I think Mr. Jar and our other safety gentleman, or traffic engineer had suggested that those were, and I believe Chris Rudishauser also had suggested that was the price for those lights.
I don't believe there's any testimony with respect to a $400,000 cost for the signalization or improvements related to the North Maple Franklin.
That may be true. It may have been through the other.
The $400,000 reference, I believe, was relative to some improvements up at the intersection of Broad and Franklin near the Ken Smith site.
Can you just explain a little bit to me why you opted to go with a 2% when you were sort of more aggressive in your approach? That Mr. Char he had strongly agreed with your decision to go look at the 2% increase in traffic. Why did you choose to do that?
A lot of it was, when we first started the study, 2% is what the DOT published, and they just, every 2 years they publish new rate tables. Well, this time around they dropped the rates for Bergen County. I didn't want to go back and redo it, especially since it was a lesser number. I said, I'll stick with the 2% because I've already done it, and I don't want to change it and then, have John go, why'd you change it? Why'd you make it less? I left it at 2%.
Would you be amenable to, or, this is going to be a question, I think, probably for the village to look at too, but for some sort of blocking off of the Cottage Place lot so that there is no access there?
I'm sorry, who said?
Has that already been looked at?
I'm
heard
deferring to another, to
I heard
somebody else.
somebody
I have
said
no.
it can't do it, but it's the
I don't know who said
village's,
it.
I think it's the village's property, so I think that, I think that would be something the village would make a decision
Well, yeah, I
about.
think, I guess there'd be nothing to object to from the applicant.
No, that's not something that,
I haven't done the title search on this property or on the village's property to the west. But I would, my recollection is that over the years, this board or the zoning board have granted a number of variances based on that free flow of traffic back and forth from one site to the other. I just don't know where the relative rights are and responsibilities would be as well. But
I don't know why the question, I don't know that it's relevant to this, and I don't think it's anything that Eric.
well, it wasn't factored into the calculations.
Right, it wasn't
which are
factored into the
basis of the report.
calculations, and as I said, nor should it be, because that would be a decision that the village would make, whether or not, and past variances that were granted on past applications, in my mind, would be, and I guess council could answer, but would not be relevant to this, so I'm not quite certain. That's a decision the village would make.
I don't think I have any further questions, other than that I would actually like to see a pedestrian study done in that area. I would have liked to see that looked at in more detail. I travel that area all the time, all day, many times a day, and I never don't sit, I'm never not backed up at any of those lights, at any of those intersections, and rarely throughout the daytime is there not a pack of kids, from morning till late in the afternoon, coming and going from the high school. It feeds right out. There's like a cut-through area right down into some of those streets. So I just think it would be something I would have liked to see in the study. That's all I have.
Okay, Joel?
No questions.
Okay, I guess you'll have adequate signage for the circulation around the building so people don't get confused. I guess right on Maple, it's right in, right out, right? Right in front. Okay, I just want to confirm that. But you'll have signage there indicating that they can't make the left and things like that.
Right, we'll have all the appropriate regulatory signs, right turn only, no left turn,
And adequate.
Try not to clutter it up too much, but have enough so that people are clear that they can't make certain movements.
And clear markings in the garage for flow too?
Correct.
Okay, for circulation?
Yes.
Did you do any turn templates for any vehicles within the garage for any emergency or anything like that?
The site engineer did. My understanding is that in discussions with both fire and police and rescue, well, not police, but fire and rescue, is that they would not put their vehicles in the garage.
Okay. And I guess the applicant's amenable to discussing modifications with our traffic engineering and agreeing in good faith to resolve any contributions and things like that. I think that'd be fair to say.
We can represent that we're always amenable to having conversations with Mr. Jar.
Just reinforcing it.
In good faith.
Yes.
In good faith, yes.
Okay. So countdown timers, it'll have actuation on the lights too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't do pre-timed signals anymore.
Yeah. And I guess, how do you think the residents will react to that if you can't make that left in? Do you think just people adapt and that there'll be adequate flow going around?
Yeah. I mean, the street network is such that they'll have opportunities to make, and they'll learn the way to get around.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, no further questions? I guess John Jar will be the next person to ask questions.
Good evening. Considering the late hour, I don't think I'm going to be able to get through my stuff by 10 o'clock, and the board has other matters to deal with at 10. So I'm not going to, I don't think it's fair to ask them to go late. What I would like to do is, I'd like to get the board's permission to meet with Mr. Keller to figure out exactly how he came up with 20% and exactly how he came up with 250,000. And when we come back for the next meeting, I could better understand how we got to that place and then report back to you on how the rational nexus of how we got from there to here. And I think it might be able to help to answer a number of the questions that have come up. With regard to the pedestrian study, which I totally agree, what I would rather do is I'd rather have the opportunity to speak with these matters with Mr. Keller, and maybe we can come up with a plan to simply improve the pedestrian access at that signal, because I think it's something that needs to get done. And it sounds to me like there may be a process that we can have here where, with regard to Mr. Voigt's comment, well, where do we come up with the other 200,000? My request or my idea might be, instead of trying to do that, maybe we could fix the light that's there up by putting a new controller, adding pedestrian heads and buttons, and make some reasonable improvements to the infrastructure we currently have that is within a reasonable proximity to the impact that they're having on the traffic. And so to answer the how I'm getting from there, from one place to the next, if you look carefully at table 3, there is Mr. Keller's future no build and future build. And you'll notice that there is a difference to the negative from the no build to the fill build. And that's the rational nexus that gets us to asking them for some help to make some improvement from a traffic standpoint. So we're not just making it up, we actually have a real reason to ask for, some modicum of traffic mitigation. I will say that based on what I've heard tonight, it sounds like their offer is right in a reasonable range for the amount of traffic. But I need to look at the whole thing, and with your permission, if I can get together with Mr. Keller, I would suspect that when next we come back, we'll have a much more clear picture that hopefully the board would feel more comfortable with.
Mr. Jar, if I may add, just to clarify for the record, if the board allows that, and I think it's a great idea, can you also work with Mr. Keller as to what the county may require of this project in terms of traffic issues? I'm sure he knows that. He's looked into that. I'm sure you do too. And you'll get on the same page. The second thing is, I see Mr. Toronto is in the audience. He testified on behalf of the applicant. The individuals who are going to have the benefit of residing at this location include those, I believe, Mr. Toronto, maybe I'm wrong, termed developmentally disabled. And I believe there's a significant aspect of walking in the community that I think Mr. Brunage pointed out. When you have anybody walking in the community, this might add to people walking in the community, this type of development. So that's something to look into for the pedestrian flow, I think, with Mr. Keller as well.
Yeah, I think that it all ties together. And again, I need the board's permission to do that.
You have any comments on that, Mr. Brunage?
There's always a willingness to communicate professional to professional and address in a collaborative and cooperative way solutions to problems. Frankly, I had understood that the level of conversation between Mr. Keller and Mr. Jar was fairly extensive and rather complete. We're intent on moving the application to conclusion, and I don't want to impose on the time that this board volunteers, but I'm hoping to go as long as you'll let me go tonight. I got one other witness plus Stippleback for the soil movement permit. Candidly, Michael has told me that the next available day, I believe, is November 21st, I think, or something like that.
Yes, that's correct.
Which creates a burden at a minimum.
Yeah, no, I understand. I mean, we can do questioning with our engineer and our planner and finish that open to the public and then reserve on John to the next meeting, and then do your planner, and then bring it to that.
It's your hearing. I'm
Yeah.
just here to put
Well,
the case
you know,
on.
we try to work with
I know you do,
you know.
and I very much appreciated it.
Yeah.
We're very sensitive to the time that volunteers give.
Yeah, we're very sensitive to the applicant, too. I know there's cost and timing issues and things like that, and we've had a full plate, and, you know, we try our best also, so. All right, so I guess our engineer can ask questions of the traffic expert if you have any.
I don't really have any, I don't have any questions. I just have two concerns for the village. One is the garbage truck entering from the the Ridgewood Avenue side. The drainage system that runs under there is very shallow, and that is going to be a problem for us. Extremely shallow. The other concern is our municipal lot. It's worn, and it's not pedestrian friendly for if let's, not that we're going to have an overflow of parking, but people might say it might be easier to park in the municipal lot and walk over to retail. It would need some improvements to make it pedestrian friendly and ADA compliant. Because that lot hasn't been touched ever, 50 years.
Did you have any
He
comments?
didn't really say that. I didn't hear him say that, the mayor, honestly.
I didn't hear him say anything.
I had to say it.
On the municipal lot, I mean, I think there's a greater likelihood that there's usage of that municipal lot today because there's such a lack of parking on site. As far as the drainage system, I mean, my understanding is that the trucks are going in and out that driveway today to serve this site because that's where the loading area is now. But obviously, if there's any damage to that pipe, it affects the applicant, and he's going to, fix it to what extent he has to. So there's probably going to be a reduction in truck traffic because we have that much less commercial space than we do today. So it's no worse or probably better than what you have today. You're welcome.
On that note, can I just ask, I mean, when you talk commercial, I mean, on that commercial space, that's office space. What kind of trucks do you have going in and out of there that?
Office supplies, garbage trucks.
Okay, just asking,
yeah.
because it didn't seem like, it's not like there's delivery because there's like for goods or anything, so I'm just kind of interested, because I don't even know what offices are in there and why there would be any. No, I know that, but I appreciate that there was a furniture store, but I just was curious today how much truck traffic. Maybe you probably don't even know the answer, so it's okay.
I don't know the specifics.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Beth, do you have any questions?
I have no questions of this witness.
Okay. Anyone from the public want to ask questions? Okay, there's no one. All right, so I guess we'll carry to November 21st, 2017. You're the only one for that night.
No further notice required as to the application inclusive of the major soil movement permit application. And no prejudice to the board. I believe Mr. Brunich is okay with that.
I said no further notice. I didn't hear that.
Yeah, without further notice and without prejudice to the board.
That's correct.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for your professionalism, Mr. Brunich.
It's always a pleasure to be here with a bunch of
Thank you,
professionals.
Eric.
Yeah. Mr. Keller.
Yeah, I think that's understood from the dialogue.
I wasn't real clear I got permission on that.
Permission granted.
That's what I was looking for.
Okay.
Michael, did you retain the exhibits last time? I thought the applicant did. Maybe I'm wrong.
No.
You did?
Well, your exhibits you cut, I mean, copies were given.
How do you feel?
They were pretty good. Oh, good.
Good results?
Nice.
I'll tell you why it came up later.
Okay, our next item will be adoption of minutes of November 15, 2016. Okay, those that were present, please take a minute to review the minutes. Let me know if there are any additions, revisions, corrections.
I just want to say hello.
Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes as written?
So moved.
Okay, Dave moved it and Melanie seconded. Michael called the roll. A yes is to approve the minutes as written.
Mr. Torrielli?
Yes.
Mr. Joel?
Yes.
Councilman Voight?
Yes?
Ms. McWilliams?
Yes.
Mr. Scheibner?
Yes. Okay, the motion's carried. The minutes are approved as written for November 15, 2016. Our next item will be an executive session. Do I have a motion to move into executive session?
So moved to discuss Valley Hospital litigation.
Okay, so Joel made the motion. Do I have a second? Second. Melanie's the second. Michael, call the roll.
Story of my life.
Mayor Knudsen? Okay, Councilman Voight?
Yes.
Mr. Joel?
Yes.
Mr. Scheibner?
Yes.
Mr. Torrielli?
Yes.
Ms. McWilliams?
Yes.
Ms. Bartel?
Yes.
Chief Van Gore?
Yes. I'm just going to read the resolution for going into closed session. Whereas the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10:4-6, permits the exclusion of the public from a portion of a meeting in certain circumstances. And whereas this board is of the opinion that such circumstances presently exist, now therefore be it resolved by the Planning Board of the Village of Ridgewood, County of Bergen, State of New Jersey, that the board conduct a closed session from which the public shall be excluded for the purpose of discussing pending and/or anticipated litigation or matters falling within the attorney-client privilege, where confidentiality is required for the attorney to exercise his ethical duties as a lawyer and/or retention of professionals, and that such discussion be made available to the public as soon as possible following the decision of the board to release same if and when appropriate, and that this resolution shall take effect immediately. Okay, we're going to move into closed session.